Today I'm answering some common questions I get regarding painting wood, okay? So the number one question I get is what is the best paint for wood? And it actually just depends on what you are using it for. So I make wood crafts. It's usually seasonal stuff. What I like to do when I'm painting wood is I don't use a primer. I'll just paint directly on there. So the best paint is depending on what you're going to use it for. So let's talk about the different paint types. We have chalk paint, we have acrylic craft paint, we also have a spray paint, and then of course our common latex paint. If I need durability, I'm going to use latex paint, okay? But if I'm using some kind of a decor item that's not going to get a lot of handling or traffic, then I can really use anything that I like. See, I like the chalk paint, I like the colors of it, so I'll use that sometimes. Or the acrylic craft paint. If I really like a color for that, then I'll use that. You can also, to further protect your wood, is to spray a clear coat on there. And my favorite is polyacrylic spray, or it is a can that you can brush it on as well. So another question I get is what sticks best to wood? So what paint sticks best to wood? And the real answer is actually dependent on the wood itself, okay? So let's talk about the wood surface itself. When dealing with raw wood, basically any paint's going to stick to raw wood. If it is stained wood, paint is not going to stick to it, because a water-based paint is not going to stick to an oil-based stain. And then additionally, if it's a clear-coated stain, it's not going to stick to that as well unless you prep the surface by sanding it beforehand. And you can just take a sandpaper and just rough it up in order to help that paint stick. So this is just a piece of plywood. You can see it has a glossy finish to it, so paint's also not going to stick to this as well. If this had to be painted, I would sand it and then get a good bonding primer to that beforehand. So I hear for unfinished wood, you need to prime it first. And the short answer is no, you don't need to prime it, because like I said, raw wood, any paint will stick to raw wood. What we don't want with wood is any white paint, any yellowing of that. So I would use a primer if I'm going to paint white, because I don't want, anytime you have a knot, those tannins are released over time and it can yellow your paint. So your best bet is to actually spray this with a shellac, paint it with white primer, and then paint it with your white latex paint. If you were just painting a seasonal item like a craft and it's unfinished wood, do you have to prime that first? And like I said, short answer is no, you don't have to. You can if you want to. A primer does have a better bonding agent, but actually a lot of latex paints come with primer in it, okay? So you don't even have to worry about that. If it's something large and I'm using latex paint with a primer in one, that's all I'm going to use. Now if I'm something smaller and I want to use my acrylic craft paint, I'll just paint it. I don't need to prime that. Primer is not always necessary, okay? It will help. It does have a good bond, and it also gives it a nice base coat, because sometimes wood will soak up the paint and you might need a couple coats. So primer can help as you are painting. Now for an interior application, say I was doing some trim work around a window, let's just say that, I would go ahead and prime that. And that brings up another question, is what is my favorite primer for wood? And I don't have a nice pretty can, but Bullseye 123, this has always been my go-to. I think it works the best as far as hiding yellow and just has really good coverage. So another question I get is what is the most durable paint for unsealed wood? So if you're going to, it depends on the application, if you're going to put it inside or outside or what you're going to use it for. So the most durable paint, hands down, is going to be your latex paint, okay? Now, if you don't want to seal it, like you are just going to paint it and leave it, you may not want a flat finish. you can use like a eggshell or semi-gloss finish. So say I'm painting a Christmas tree and I'm going to put it outside on my porch. I'm going to paint it with latex paint, but I'm also going to seal it with a clear coat. And for exterior clear coats, I use Hellman Spar Urethane. You can brush it on or spray it on. It is basically it's a clear poly, and it will really help defend against moisture and the elements outside. So another question I get is which primer is best, and is there something else that you can use besides primer? So let's think about this question. Do you want to use primer because you think the paint will bond better to the wood? If so, it's actually more of a surface preparation answer. Because if you're using primer thinking you're going to get a better bond, you're better off taking some time, getting some rough sandpaper, and roughing up your surface, whatever you're going to do. Like I said earlier, the stained board, I would sand this before I painted it because paint's just not going to bond very well to this. Can you paint directly on wood? The answer is yes, you definitely can. Now back to the primer. If you really want to use a primer, you can. Paint will soak up, depending on the wood type, of course. It gets soaked up into that wood, so you may need a couple coats, but yes, you can directly paint on wood for sure. So I get asked if oil-based or water-based paint is better, and it really doesn't matter. I don't have much experience with oil-based paint, because most of our latex paint that we go to the store and buy is water-based. So if you're going to use something out exterior, I would get the exterior version of latex paint. If you're going to paint something and put it outside, your best bet is to paint it with latex paint, water-based, but you want to seal it with a clear coat. And outside, you want an oil-based clear coat. So that would be polyurethane or spar urethane. I prefer spar urethane. This is Hellman Spar Urethane. It comes in a spray version, or you can brush it on as well.